in 1996, Carrie Strug was the anchor for the vault to get the gold medal. And if she got the right score, if she did very well, the United States would get the gold medal. She went down and she ran down that line, hit the vault, jumped over, and she really hurt her leg. Do you remember it? You remember that? She's on the side, she's crying, she had hurt herself really, really bad. She needs a good score in order for the United States to place. Now, a trial came her way that day, and trials come our way every day. We go through things, we go through struggles, we have people come against us, we have things happen. Some seem like they're not so much of something, and some seem like a lot. Now, she had sprained her ankle really, really bad, but she still had one more run to make, to stay with her team, to do that thing that she had planned for. We don't think it's much. Oh, it's just one day, one moment, one vault. But she had prepared her entire life for that moment. Since she was a child, blood, sweat, and tears, she had placed into getting to the Olympics, working with her team tirelessly, and getting to that moment where she could win gold. She got there, she sprained her ankle, and now there was really no hope, no possibility that she could possibly win this medal. But she got back to the line crying and in pain, and she took off down that line. Hits the vault. Right? Right? I'm trying to wake you up this morning. And she lands it on one leg. Boom! Gold medal! She goes down into legendary status. This little girl is about this tall. Flips over that with injury, with struggle, with trial, and lands it on one leg. You don't practice it that way, do you? But she lands it on one leg and wins gold. Legendary status. Now, think about it. I wonder how she thought during that process. I wonder how she went through getting to that place where she was going to win gold. Did she know it or didn't she? Later on, there was someone who asked her, she said, you know what I did? She said, I didn't think I could do it. I really didn't. But my coach was on the sideline telling me the whole time, you can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. You got what it takes. You have what it takes. You can do it. I'm here with you. Encouraging her the whole way. She said when she ran down that line, and I'd like to see the film, when she ran down that line, her eyes was on her coach the whole time. She never took her eyes off of her coach. She hit that vault. She did whatever moves you do in the air, and she landed the impossible because she didn't take her eyes off the coach. Now, in this world, every one of us are dealing with things today. Things aren't easy in this world. If you got it too easy, something's wrong. The world's not meant to be that way. There are trials and tribulations. Christ told us it was coming. He told us to take heart because he's overcome the world. Stay close to him. Keep your eyes fixed and focused on Christ. He'll bring you through. He'll give you the strength. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Amen. What seemed impossible, it may not seem like much of a story, but we've seen it with our own eyes. It was back in the day when we still turned on NBC and watched the Olympics. Nobody watches anymore, but boy, remember when we would build up to the Summer Olympics? It was the biggest event of the year, and it lasted for weeks, and everybody was glued to their screen, patriotically supporting their country. We may not think about it as much today. We don't, because times have changed a bit. But troubles still are here, aren't they? Do you still deal with issues and so forth? Sure you do. This morning's scripture lesson tells us a lot about ourselves. I want to read something to you from Dr. Evans. I love Dr. Tony Evans. If you hear me quoting Dr. Evans, it's Tony Evans from from the Oak Cliff Bible Church down in Texas. And this is what he says. He says that our faith is measured by our feet and not your feelings. One of the best ways to determine if you have as much faith as you think you have is to observe how you respond when stuff goes south or when things go sideways. When it seems that the world itself has chosen to collapse on top of you, all at once causing you to face a compounding level of issues, it is then that you will be able to judge your authentic faith level by the choices you make and the responses you display. Last week, Cindy shared with us the people of Israel coming into the desert and they don't have anything to eat. What did they do? They grumble, they complain. Does it sound familiar? Do we do that? Come on. I'm talking to you today. I know I'm a little loud, so just gotta wake everybody up a little bit. Now this week's lesson is just a progression from that one. And what happens? They're in the desert and there's no water. So they go back to the playbook that they always use and they grumble and they complain. And this is what Moses says. I love this. Why do you quarrel with me? But he doesn't stop there. Why do you put the Lord to the test? But it says the people were thirsty for water, and he said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to do this to us? How quickly we forget the things that God has done for us. How quickly we forget all of the wonderful things he provides all week until it comes to a place where our faith gets tested. Now, God brought them to the desert to test them. And whatever desert you're in, whatever situation you're in, it may actually be a test for you. How will you respond? Will you release your faith? Or will you go back to the playbook that the Israelites would use? They would get there and then they go, oh, the Lord this and the Lord that. But first, before they got to that point, they started playing with Moses. Moses goes on to say this, is the Lord among us or not? That's what they were saying to him. Is the Lord among us or not? Because that's really the question of all of your faith. Where are you today? What is testing your stability? What has collapsed around you, or what is going good? Because people lose God in the good things too. It's like a radio. They see the radio. They hear the music coming out of it. But inside that radio, there isn't drums. Inside that radio, there isn't a guitar or a band. It's being transmitted from a source. So if you have a radio-like blessing in your life and you forget where the signal is coming from, what's the difference? What's the difference? Because when your focus is on the things that you have been given and not the source through which they came from, when trouble comes, our faith always fails. Does that make sense? Did I say it clearly? A lot of times we get so blessed with things or so caught up in the things that we have, the relationships we have, or some of the pomp and frills that come with being associated with someone or being someone with a great skill. But we forget the place that they came from. So when that changes, when somebody comes against you, when something happens in your finances, we find that a lot of times we grumble and complain because maybe we weren't as thankful as we thought we were, because if we were, we would have been focusing on the source, and the trouble may not have been so bad to us because our faith would be being released immediately. Does that make sense? I'm doing like Wednesday night Bible study with you here on Sunday. Now, I'm not pointing fingers at any of you. Just understand that I'm pointing this at myself because I go through these things and I wonder sometimes, is God with us or not? You know? Do you ever go through that? Now, I don't say that. I never say that. But my actions and my responses do, don't they? Isn't Dr. Evans right when he says that the testing of our faith, we find out exactly where we're at very quickly? It's telling to God, but it's also telling to us. In this room, there may be many gems. But if you want to find out which ones are real, place it underwater and see what happens. When the flood comes in, how do we respond? And that's how a jeweler works too. If he wants to know the good one from the fake, he'll place them underwater, and the one that still shines in the flood or in the overcoming water is the one that's actually the genuine article. You could place cubic zirconia and a diamond inside of water next to each other. Only the diamond will shine. When we go through faith, we talk about the refiner's fire, and God does refine us. God comes to us and he refines us. He turns up the heat on the stove of life, and he asks us to trust him. It gets hotter and hotter, and that's what happens with gold and with silver. You may have heard this before. They ask, how do you know if all the impurities are out? How do you know that all the bad stuff is out? And what he says is, I get it so hot to the point, and I leave it in there until I see my reflection in that which I'm heating up, silver and gold. The true value of it, the purest gold, the purest silver, the refiner can see his face in it. God refines us, purer than silver or gold. And as we go through life, we can look down into that. He looks down into it, and he should see his reflection. Because we spent so much time with him, we trusted him through those times, that all that old stuff, all that junk just starts to bust off. I guess I'll illustrate you guys to death this morning. Anybody remember the days when you didn't have power steering? Did anybody have a car? Raise your hand. Come on, you can raise your hand. I know you don't. Listen, you know what would happen? You had to really turn that wheel, didn't you? You had to really turn that wheel, unless the car was really moving fast. You had to turn that wheel. And what happened to the wheel once you let go of it? Didn't it always return back to center? It would always come back to that which it came from. So, and if your car today is low on power steering fluid, you know what it's like, because you're just grabbing onto this thing, turning it as hard as you can in your own strength, right? But when the power steering is good, when it's tapped into what it needs, it flows, it moves, it gets to where it needs to go. But when we let go of that wheel, when we let go of it and we give it to God, it's a much different story than not having power steering fluid. Because we go back to our original nature in sin. The things that we do, the troubles that we have, when troubles come and we let go of God, we, like a rubber band, snap back to those old ways, don't we? Didn't you ever get upset with God or your circumstances or your situation, and you find just how quickly you're saying those things you didn't say before or in a long time, or doing those things that you thought you were free from? And I promise you were. But when we let go of God, we let go of the freedom that we have in him. We let go of the strength that we have in him. We let go of what he has called us to do. Now, the beautiful part about God is he never misses a thing, and he stays with us. His hand is always out there to grab us, fill that power steering fluid back up, and get you going. One of the ways we miss it, the people grumbled against their leader, right? The next story that we read, which is an eyewitness account. Who read it? Thank you, Juanita. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Loud and clear, too. I love it. What happened? They had a battle that came forth. They were attacked. Their leader gets up on the hill, and God makes it contingent upon something. As long as Moses' hands were upraised into the Lord's air, right, they won. But when his hands were lowered, they began to lose. When his hands were lowered, when he became tired, and that's what happens with leaders, that's what happens with administrators, that's what happens with people in all different areas of this world. When we lower our hands, when we let our praise down, we need those around us in our church family, in our work family, those of faith, to get under us. It says they put a rock under him to sit on, and they each lifted a hand, her on one side and Aaron on the other. And as his hands remained in the air while supported by the people of God, by those who are called children of God, the pastor, the leader, was able to keep his hands up, and God brought them a great victory as they worked together and maybe worked with somebody that maybe they were a little upset with right before them. God calls us specifically to work together even when we have struggles. Now, you guys are good with me, so this isn't pointed at you. Don't go there. You guys are very good to me. But understand that sometimes how we treat our leaders, no matter who we think they are or whatever, says a lot about our faith too. God challenges us in our faith, whether we like our leaders or not, whether we like our pastors or not, whether we like our bosses or not, whether we like our parents or not. He still calls us to support them and to lift them up, because ultimately we are honoring him. Ultimately we are operating inside of our faith. Ultimately, he is going to do what he's promised to do. So if he sends someone your way, and you don't like him very much, he tells us to pray for them and to do good to them. Why? I'm going to read it to you. Jesus said this to the two blind folks. Do you believe that I am able to do this? Yes, Lord, they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, according to your faith, let it be done. I believe that people miss out on the miracles that are theirs, the life that could be theirs, the calling that could be theirs, because they do it according to the way they get nervous, or the way they get anxious, or the way they get angry, or the way they get bitter, and not according to the faith that we're supposed to have. And sometimes that's the leaders that have been placed over you, the pastors who have been put in place, the bosses that you have, and even the parents, no matter how mad you may be at them. This is not a statement of work. It's not a statement of politics. It's not a statement of church. But God has given us a way of life to live. And victory can be to anybody in the way that God has planned if we just keep our eyes fixed on the Master, fixed on Christ, fixed on the author and the finisher of our faith. Are you with me this morning? Because if we find that we're coming against someone in the same way we say they act, all we're doing is letting go of the wheel that Christ has given us in him and reverting back, jerking back to that way old person. We actually become like the people we are saying that we're mad at or upset with because they're acting a certain way. But to be the people of God, we can't let go of him. He doesn't let go of us. He's never let go of me, no matter what I've done, no matter what I've said. I'm here today because his love and his kindness endures forever. And I am here as a result of it. I tell you this because we're in a trying time in our world. To get political for a second, which I'm not, it doesn't matter who's in office, 4 years or 8 years. Isn't just half the country upset, whether they're in faith or not, and whoever's there, and they say every horrible thing that they could possibly say against someone? I saw it for these last 4 years. I saw it the 8 years prior. I saw it the 8 years prior. I saw it the 8 years prior. I saw it the 4 years prior. I saw it the 8 years prior. It is up to us to pray for those in leadership, to lift up their arms. They may not deserve it. I'm not saying they do. But let us be a people of faith and let God bring the victory about in the way that he has challenged you. Does that make sense? Yes. You guys are so quiet this morning, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with this. I want to read this to you. Dwyer said this. He said, afflictions are blessings. Fiery trials make golden Christians. Sanctified afflictions are spiritual promotions. Did you hear that part that Juanita said today? This is what she said. And I want to make sure of this. He says, write this down on a scroll as something to be remembered and make sure Joshua hears it. Make sure Joshua hears it. He's the next leader coming up. I don't know whether he knew it or not, but God wanted to make sure he heard it. Not just to be remembered for a time, but to teach you what real leadership is. Joshua was on the battlefield. Joshua saw the victory. And as they looked up and they saw the staff of God in his hand, they saw his arms upheld, they had victory because God provided it. He wanted to make sure that the next level of leadership heard what God was saying. Make sure Joshua hears it. And he answered that question when he broke open the rock. Is the Lord among us or not? He provided for them. When they were attacked by the Amalekites, this evil group of people that came after them, for no reason at all, God brought them victory. Make sure Joshua hears it. And today, I don't know who comes after me. I don't know who's hearing at home. I don't know what's going on in everybody's life. But I've said this today to make sure you guys hear it. God is faithful, and it's up to us. Because you can't please God without faith anyhow. What can we possibly give him other than faith? Could we make gold any better than it is? Can we make a mountain look more beautiful than he did? What can I do? I can dress this body up any way, shape, or form, but what's inside of it is what matters. Our faith is tested. This is what the word says. Am I going on too long? Am I going on too long? Is it okay? I'm loud. You guys are quiet. So I want to read this to you because it makes sense. Consider it pure joys, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Are you lacking something today? Maybe it's time to allow the fire to be turned up, to draw closer and keep your eyes on Jesus Christ and watch what he does. He is very faithful to us. We've made it this far, even though so many times in our life we didn't think we would make it through that time. But he's been faithful time and time again. The problem is we keep our eyes on whatever that may be, the radio, and we forget where the signal's actually coming from. We forget where the blessing and the strength actually comes from. God sends me to you. I give you this word this morning to strengthen you, to remind you. But let me make no mistake about it. The message that you hear in your spirit that confirms what he's already saying to you comes from him. Thank him for it. Thank him for it. And the rest will work itself out. Treat others like you want to be treated. It's a good way to live life, right? So, I just want to close out with this one last time here this morning. I'll read what Rutherford said, because I like this. He says this in reference to a sanctified trial, meaning that God brought it and allowed you to go through it. He says, "Why should I complain at the plow of my Lord that furrows deep in my soul? Why should I complain at the plow of my Lord that maketh deep furrows in my soul? I know that he's no idle workman. I know that he wants a prospering crop. I owe to him everything for the file he places upon my life, for the plow he runs through it, for the hammer in the furnace that knocks out all those things that I struggle with, all those things that hold me back." So as we go into our communion portion of the service, and it won't take long because we do it a little bit differently during this time, but think about that. I want you to offer up anything that is holding you back. And I always tell you the litmus test between knowing whether it's from God or not is if it draws you even the shortest, littlest amount away from his word or away from him, it is not of him. So if you are complaining or grumbling or struggling with something this morning, that's okay. It's human. We go right back to where the power steering isn't there and it leads us to, right? But I'd ask you to remember this little girl. This little girl worked so hard. Disaster hit. She basically almost broke her leg. And she didn't have time to recover. She just needed to run down that road. That was her moment. That was her time. She had a team relying upon her and a nation wishing her well and hoping to win as well. She ran down that and she didn't take her eyes off her coach. Jesus Christ coaches us. He's with us. Stay with him. So as we come into communion today, remember what he's offered up for us and offer up all those things that keep us back from him. Amen?
Amen.